I'd like to call the meeting of the Newington Board of Education to order for February 7th, 2024. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Deb, would you please call the roll?
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here. Thank you. I'd like to open for public participation. If you're in the room, you may come to the head of the table. If you're online, you can raise your hand. Seeing none, can move on. We actually have to amend our agenda for the evening. So can I have the motion, Sean?
I'd like to make a motion that the Newington Board of Education suspend the rules and add an additional item to the agenda, executive session for the hearing committee. And I need a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Deb, would you please call?
Yes.
Yes.
Anthony Mailing,
Yes.
Timothy Newton,
Yes.
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 Jessica Weaver,
Yes.
Anastasia Yap.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. And then next motion.
I'd like to make another motion to move that the Newington Board of Education add item EA, executive session, student confidential records. And I need a second.
Second.
Larry Beecher,
Yes.
John Howard,
Yes.
Anthony Mailing,
Yes.
Timothy Newton,
Yes.
Amy Parati,
Yes.
Yes.
Jessica Weaver,
Yes.
Anastasia.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, new business. Our first item is a presentation of Superintendent of Schools 2024-2025 budgets. Dr. Bremens.
And look, I'm on the last page of the budget presentation. And in conclusion, have a wonderful evening. All righty. I just wanted to start the evening by acknowledging that a lot of my colleagues are on the line tonight, some of our principals. So they all contributed to the development of this budget. And around the table, I'd like to thank Steve Farisi, Lou Jakomowitz, Wendy Krause, and Kristen Freeman. They also put tremendous amount of hours into this budget, which you'll hear in detail over the coming nights. And off to the side there is Karen Sear, our assistant business manager. She will show the board later this evening how to orientate for that budget book, since many of you are new, as well as our attendees who just got a budget book. It is kind of has some specialty pieces to it that we want to explain to make sure you're understanding how to read through it and what it contains. But we'll get to that a little bit later on in the presentation. So tonight I'm going to go do an overview of our budget presentation, where you'll hear some of the driving forces behind it. What drives a lot of our work, though, is our vision and mission, which I want to start with because anything that's been put into this budget or kept in this budget does align tightly to our vision and mission for the district. So on your screen right now is our belief that every NPS student will be a contributing member of their community and highly prepared for life after graduation. That's a vision we have for all of our kids. And we also have a mission that speaks to how we want all of our children. It's not down there. It's weird. Oh, I see what happens. We want all of our children to have an equitable educational opportunity so that every student leaves our district prepared for life after graduation, but also having their needs met, whatever their needs might be. And finally, our portrait of a graduate also speaks to where we want our kids to, what they want them to leave our school district with. We want them to be excellent communicators. We want them to be good citizens, both of the town of Newington and beyond. And we want them to be critical thinkers. Now that looks different as they progress through the system. What it means to be a good communicator as a kindergarten student is a little different than a 12th grader, but we have those goals for our children throughout their time with us. So all of these things are embedded in everything that we do. Let me see if I can do it right this time. Share this tab instead. We also have a theory of action for the district. And that features, let's see if I can get that to go bigger. That if Newington Public Schools establishes, engages routines for learning, structures, and accountability for equity, then we will create a culture that fosters equity and excellence for all of our students and eliminates racial disparities. So that's another one of our overarching goals here in the district. And then lastly is our district goal and strategy. And something that's very, very important to us is to reduce the opportunity gap for historically marginalized and underrepresented students through access to high quality curriculum that is rigorous, relevant, and engaging. And that major strategy that we have for this year is to support all our schools in developing routines that promote a culture for equity, informed by our NPS canon, which are 3 books that we adhere to, Culture Responsive Teaching and the Brain, Courageous Conversations, and our SRBI framework. And all of this is so that our schools work on and achieve their school improvement plan. An interesting fact is that while tonight I'll share with you that our students have recovered academically from the COVID gap for the most part, where that gap is still fairly wide is with our subgroups. Our Black and Brown students are still not achieving at the same pace as our white students. So while we have done some good work closing some of those losses from COVID, there are still some issues that are pervasive in Newington that we want to continue to work on. But I really do want to start off with some celebrations. Some of them you may have heard at the budget overview a few weeks ago. Some of them I've added. We received a grant-funded position for a mental health counselor at the high school, and she is now offering 3 courses on mental health well-being at the high school that are brand new because of that grant, and they are all full. She could have offered more. She also is working both at the high school and at our middle schools, so this grant is having an impact at both levels. We just began a partnership with Connecticut Behavioral Health to expand mental health counseling district-wide. That goes live in March, but that will allow our students, with parental permission, to receive counseling from a certified counselor, not one of our school employees, during the school day at no cost to the district, and parents simply need to leverage their health insurance. So that's going to really, I hope, crack open even more services for our kids. We just started a pilot of our Nor'easter Academy of Excellence. That's a program that is for students who are having some challenges in a typical high school setting. And they are coming to the town hall using our Transition Academy 4 afternoons a week and receiving some very personalized educational experiences that are based on a mastery of the standards. It's going very well. It's full. It's 15 students, which is the most that we want to take. And I visit it nearly every day, and it's going incredibly well. we also were able to partner with the town to use their gym one Monday per week, 1 day per week to promote both health and PE classes. And that's a collaborative with the Parks and Rec Department and the town. I mentioned earlier, or our last meeting, that Anna Reynolds, Ruth Chafee, and John Patterson were all named schools of distinction for some of their academic achievements. Last time I mentioned too that our class of 2023 earned over 1,000 college credits, which saves our families $1 million in tuition avoidance. We are one of the top 4 in the state for offering college credit-bearing courses, and we're going to try to offer a few more next year, which I'll discuss in a minute. And we've been recognized by the National Association of Music Merchants as the best 2023 community for music students, and we've gotten this award several years in a row. Finally, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, our student achievement for the majority of our students has returned to pre-pandemic levels, but that is not the case for some of our students who come from more marginalized groups. We have made some great strides as well in our equity work in the district. The district equity leadership team, many of whom are sitting around this table, have supported each school in establishing routines for equity. They've also helped schools establish and align their infrastructure to promote the school improvement plans, and that looks at how some of their teams are used and how they're all aligned to our overarching mission. Steve Farisi and Kim Davis have launched the Future Educators Club at NHS. It's up and running, and it is a very diverse group of individuals, and these are students that may want to go on to become teachers. We're trying to develop a grow your own program to combat the teacher shortage. This year, 33% of all certified staff hired were educators of color. And finally, as we go out throughout the district, and we do this very frequently, both as a central office team and several of us in smaller groups go out and observe PLCs, professional learning communities, and they are discussing and or implementing culture responsive pedagogy. That is instruction that takes into account that the learners in the room come from a variety of cultural backgrounds and trying to meet them where they're at and understand that maybe their learning styles are different and that we need to kind of tailor our instruction to meet the needs of all of our learners. And I'll show you momentarily kind of how diverse we really are statistically looking at our demographics.
I was just wondering if we have graduation rates for those students who are electing to take college credits in high school. Like, how far are they completing their degree after completing credits?
Meaning how they do in college, how
Yes.
they fare in college. That we do keep statistics of because the state helps us with that, but I don't have that at my fingertips for tonight. I will get that to you by Monday. Okay, college graduation rates. All right, let me get into the student demographics because many people say, well, the population in Newington is stable right now, and it certainly is less than it was 10 years ago in terms of our schools, but why do we still have such needs in the school district? Well, these next few charts will hopefully illuminate that. I always look back at our history for the last 40 years, and we were not that diverse back in the late 70s. We had a very small percentage of special ed students. 504 students were not, I don't believe the 504 law was used in schools at that time. Our ML population was less than 1%, and free and reduced lunch statistics I don't even believe were kept back in the late 70s. But as you see over the years, with 78 being our baseline, things have become very complex with how we educate our kids. So this year, we are now up to 16% of our students are special education. So that's up almost 2% since 2018. That is a statewide trend. It is probably another post-pandemic phenomenon that kids who had some learning challenges, it was only made worse through the pandemic. Similarly, for those that aren't aware, 504 is a section of the law that provides for students who have a disability that impairs their learning, but not as significantly as a special ed disability, are entitled to school-based accommodations. There's no funding behind that from any state or federal level, but these kids are entitled to receive accommodations, and there are quite a bit of paperwork behind that. So you can see over the years, we are now at about almost 7.5% of our students receive accommodations through a 504 plan. ML students continue to grow. I will tell you, this is a chart that's probably current to about January, and it's even higher now. One of our principals called me the other day, and we received 2 new students from Ukraine last week. So we are receiving new students from throughout the world on a regular basis. And that, again, is a state phenomenon as well. I think Newington's probably had a slightly higher average than the state when it comes to those folks coming to us, maybe because we live near big cities. Our free and reduced lunch rate continues to rise. It's gone up 5 percentage points in the last 2 years. And that just speaks to the fact that some of our families that are in town, are having financial challenges that certainly impact their child's education. Our open choice numbers are down slightly from 2 years ago, but that is still a population that we serve from Hartford, and there's quite a bit of funding behind that, which I will share momentarily. Put this presentation mode. Just in case folks were interested in how this all breaks down, we have a wide range of racial and ethnic backgrounds that we serve in the district. We have less than 1% of our students are American Indian. 6% of our students identify as multiple racial backgrounds, and that's just whatever their parents check off on our demographic data that we collect. So it could be any of these categories. They consider they're a mixture of both. We are 6% Black, about 11% Asian and Pacific Islander, 28% Hispanic, and 55% white. And then that looks differently at some of our schools. In some of our schools, we are less than 50% white at this time. Here's our breakdown. And again, I think this would change a little bit in the last few weeks, because it does change all the time. But you can see by these numbers that we have a significant number of students that have multi-language needs. In other words, English is not their primary language, and they need specialized instruction to be able to be successful in school. So you can see the breakdown by our schools. E. Green has the highest percentage-wise, as well as John Patterson, of students who need multilingual services. And typically as they age, that number drops, because if we have the students long enough, they can test out of that program. The goal would be, as they spend more time with us, they're getting proficient in English. But in the interim, they require significant support and services to be successful. My goals for the budget that you'll hear about this evening are to continue our equity work and all of our current programs, to continue our pre-K expansion, which will be very important in light of the new kindergarten legislation. We have kids now that are too young to start kindergarten for next year, based on the new start date or start age for kindergarten is you must be 5 by September 1st. It used to be by January 1st. So parents are able to apply for a waiver. We have 50 parents who've applied for a waiver, but not all of those kids will receive a waiver. Therefore, we probably will have more demand on our pre-K programs. You'll see in a moment that we have to comply with state mandates, and there's a lot of them. Several of them, and they're all unfunded, or most of them. Several of them have finances attached to them, such as the HVAC legislation, financial literacy, and requirements for our ML students. We want to also retain some of our ESSER positions to support students, teachers, and district security. And we really want to make sure we show our teachers that they have job security. It would cause a lot of rippling effect if teachers felt there were going to be layoffs next year. However, I will show in this presentation how several positions will be reduced by attrition. So the budget is designed to maintain critical levels of support and adhere to mandates. So as I stated earlier, there is now a requirement that every child who's currently a freshman has to take financial literacy before they graduate. We had, prior to that legislation, about 50% of our kids took our current equivalent of financial literacy. Now everyone has to take it. We did all kinds of configurations to try to avoid hiring a new teacher, but there's just no way to meet the demand that we'll now have without one more teacher. And that'll still include redirecting some of our current teachers to teach financial literacy, but there's just not enough teachers to go around to meet this mandate without one more. We do intend to add 2 courses at the high school, AP Pre-Calculus, so that'll be another credit-bearing course, and Leadership in Literature, which is a course developed by one of our teachers that allows students to see different forms of leadership within literature. Neither one of these are a big ticket item. I just want to show the board and the town that we're adding small improvements as we can. Next year, we intend to offer full-day pre-K programs at Patterson and Anna Reynolds. This year, they're only offered at E. Green and Chafee. However, any type of expansion expenses is going to be offset by tuition. All of those programs, we do charge tuition, both our full-day program and our part-day programs. Because John Patterson now has 20 or more students who speak Spanish, or Spanish is their primary language, we have to add a tutor position at Patterson to meet a mandate. So as I mentioned in our budget overview meeting a few weeks back, the minute any school hits the threshold of 20 students who speak the same language, we have to add a position to meet that need. Right now, both Reynolds and the high school and now Patterson all qualify for that mandate. And here are the positions that I would like to retain that were previously funded by ESSER dollars. 2 ML teachers, which I believe we've already articulated how that population continues to grow in Newington. 2 board certified behavior analysts. Those are folks that help us create behavior programs for children who are struggling to manage their behavior in a school setting. Though I believe we've seen a lot of academic recovery from our students, there are still significant behavioral and emotional challenges with our students that can be somewhat attributed to the pandemic. During the pandemic, we did add a security guard to every elementary school. Their initial purpose was to monitor the isolation rooms, but they quickly became a valued member of the staff and serve now obviously in a security function. Just an example today, one of our elementary schools had a concern that there may be someone that was going to trespass, kind of a domestic situation, and having our security guard on site allowed us to feel a sense of comfort that there would be a plan to protect the school and the perimeter. I mean, obviously we use law enforcement as well, but it was been a huge asset to our elementary schools to have security guards. They monitor traffic in the morning and the afternoon. They're on site all day long. They help support drills. They help manage the hallways to make sure there's no either disruptions or certainly no one coming in that shouldn't come in. Our parents tell me all the time how much comfort they take in the fact that we now have security guards at the elementary level. Pre-COVID, we had them at the middle school and we had them at the high school. The 4 at the elementary schools are new. Prior to that, we simply had to share them, and it was not very effective. ESS services, that's Effective School Solutions. It's an agency that we've been using for years. They started at our high school and then expanded to Kellogg, and then we used COVID dollars to expand to Wallace. It's important to note, though, that when we found out the ESSER $3 could expand into next year, we did consciously avoid spending as much of it as we could. So that $400,000 not only covers Wallace for next year, it covers Kellogg and part of the high school. And those were previously board-funded areas. There was a lot of limitations in how you could use that carryover money, so the best way for us to use it was to offset ESS. And we want to maintain 1 instructional coach at the high school. We had 2, 1 left, so we're not going to fill him through attrition, but we would like to maintain 1 there because the high school has no coaches without that 1. So there's a lot of assumptions that are already in this budget that were designed to keep our ask as low as possible. 1 is grant funding. This year, with all of the different grants that we have, and when we get into the details of the budget books, you're going to see which teachers are paid out of a title grant, which teachers are paid out of an IDEA grant or staff, which teachers or staff are out of open choice, mental health, etc. All of these grant offsets are clearly articulated within the budget books, so you know where that money goes. but our grant offsets this year or next year are anticipated to be $2.4 million. We also are working with the town to develop an MOU, which will be an agenda item after this presentation, that will allow us to transfer some of the resources that we receive for our open choice special ed students into the non-lapsing fund to give us another offset to the budget. And we anticipate that if that all goes well, that would be a $400,000 offset to next year's budget. We have continued to rely on the non-lapsing fund to reduce our budget ask. Next year, we anticipate that we will leverage $1.9 million out of the non-lapsing fund, and that would be inclusive of the $400,000 MOU arrangement with the anticipation that it will go through. We are proposing a new twist on how our magnet school tuition is paid. Right now, our the ECS funding that goes to the town, as well as a promised magnet school tuition offset, are up in the air. We were told at the original onset of the budget that's at the state right now that districts would pay 40% less in magnet school tuition, and that Newington's ECS grant would go up by $1.9 million. Last year, it went up by about $800,000, so essentially double. We're proposing that since that is such a moving target right now, there are districts in the state, which I'm trying to gather that data, where they don't budget for magnet school tuition in the board's budget, but rather they just notify the town, and again, the town would have to agree to this, that the magnet school tuition should just be taken directly out of ECS money. Now, I'm sure everyone's been paying attention to the proposed governor's budget, which is reducing potentially the ECS money. And I saw the figures today, and instead of 1.9 million, the town is now expected to get about 1.4 million. So even if the worst case scenario happens, it's still a substantial increase over the ECS money the town got last year. So that's just a proposal. It's in the budget. If that is not something that the board approves or ultimately the town does not approve, then we are still currently having to project $566,000 in magnet school tuition for next year, because we don't know whether that reduction or state offset is going to come through. It was promised all last year, but now in the governor's proposed budget, it is at risk. And finally, we participate in the open choice program. Over the last few years, we have not budgeted for the maximum reimbursement from open choice because we've been a little hesitant to do that. A lot of that money comes in very late in the school year. But as we look back over the last 2 years, we feel comfortable now putting in the maximum offset for open choice, which is $928,000. So those are all assumed and in the budget. So if these were not in the budget already, the number that would be asked for tonight would be higher. Here's some things we would have liked to put in the budget, but we did not. There was a proposal to add speech pathology services for the district. We're going to just make do with what we have. Or there was a proposal to add a school psychologist. Instead of doing that, we're going to split one school psychologist between 2 schools. We wanted to add a new teacher to support our Educators Rising program that is now kind of discussed at the school, but not firmly a course yet. We're still hoping to leverage at least one teacher next year to teach one course of that program. The club also is an offshoot of that, but we did not add a teacher. There was a request for STEM exploratory updates for Wallace and Kellogg, which we are not adding in an effort to keep the budget ask lower. There was a request to add flexible furniture for our world language classrooms, a very creative and innovative idea, but something that we feel is not a priority given all the other priorities. We are intending to not replace 2 retired individuals who are retiring at the end of this year, and we're not going to replace them. One's a middle school teacher and one's an elementary teacher. And we are eliminating several ESSER-funded positions through attrition. We had 2.2 FTE interventionists. Those 2 will backfill retired teachers. And a 0.2 refers to a teacher that we had made full-time during the pandemic. We're now reducing her back to part-time. And we did eliminate an instructional coach at the high school through attrition. So here's an example of how costs are escalating over the years. I don't think this chart will surprise anyone, but I'll just draw your attention to the two most current years. Special ed costs this year are about 13.5 million, and this does also include transportation. And for those that are not familiar with this, some of our students do have to go out of district to be educated. There's a cost to transport them. And some of our kids within district have to have special ed busing. And there's a cost affiliated with that. Excuse me while I put this on mute. American Red Cross, they want my blood. I got O positive. I'm very popular with the American Red Cross. So special ed grants that's a pass-through grant that we get. That's going to go up a little bit next year from 837,000 to 911,000. Our cost for EL programs is a little bit less next year, and the reason for that is we've got an EL teacher retiring, and we believe we'll probably hire her at a slightly lower rate.
Yeah, can you can't see the last column for that screen.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see what's happening.
We just take it out of the presentation for now, just for that.
That change anything?
Conveniently blocks them. Turn off the camera.
I'm just showing all the attendees. Greg, any ideas on how to do that?
Maybe just take it out of presentation mode and like.
How do we get the picture of the room off the screen? Or
Two things going on here. This is the meeting and this is-
It's the picture makes people not be able to see.
No, we want the other. She wants to
So
put that.
if
She wants to put that.
Okay.
There you
You're the best.
Alrighty. Yes, Craig's position will be in next year's budget. All right, where did I leave off? So the cost of magnet school tuition is flat funded from this year to next. Cost of transportation for homeless students, ironically, is going to went down a little bit this year. We have more homeless students, but sometimes the transportation can be more expensive than in other years, depending on where the students need to be transported from. And then I did put here in the lower quadrant, the ECS money. This is if the ECS grant is fully funded. Then the town would have seen an increase of $1.9 million. Based on the governor's budget, if nothing were to change, it's going to be about a $1.4 million increase. Either way, there's a significant increase. All right, let's talk about the budget.
Weaver
Oh.
has a question. Sorry, just quickly about the transportation. For our homeless students, it's our buses, but just curious with the special ed, is it our buses or is it other contracting out, given the contracted services usually?
It's both.
Okay.
And actually, so it can be contracted services for homeless individuals as
Okay.
well. Just to give the folks around the table a perspective, we are currently transporting students from Danbury to Newington every day, and from New London to Newington every day because of various special circumstances. That's a substantial price tag, but it is required by law.
Thank you.
All right. I'll briefly go over this. This was something I presented during the landscape, but many districts in the state of Connecticut face some of the same challenges we do. Everyone experiences inflation, certified staff shortages, which mean you're hiring people at a higher step, volatility with special ed costs. In fact, one of the budget issues that I advocate for at the state is our reimbursement for high special ed costs, and that is another piece that's sometimes volatile at the state level. And I've asked our local legislators to advocate for what's called excess cost funding, because those are we have high cost students where the state is supposed to fully reimburse us for that. Lately, they give us maybe 72% back when it's supposed to be 100% back of the threshold. Then we also have New mandates for financial literacy, that's a statewide issue. Everyone's got to deal with the HVAC, air quality legislation, and everyone's losing their ESSER funding unless you were able to carry over some, which I had already mentioned, we're carrying over about $400,000. Where we're a little different than other districts is our increasing diverse student population, which is driving us to continue to add to our ML services and our mental health services. We also have our paraprofessionals. We're the only district in the state that we are aware of that does not offer our paraprofessionals health benefits. While there's a statewide para shortage, we are even further behind the 8 ball because we're less competitive because we do not offer health benefits. And that has also led us to, because all of our paras are special ed paras and they're part of a child's educational plan, when we can't fill them with a Newington hire, we have to resort to outside agencies, which is a much higher cost. So that is unique to us. Or sometimes we have to backfill it with a higher cost para just because we have to make sure our special ed students' IEPs are adhered to strictly. And we're one of the few districts that we're aware of that has had to rely on the non-lapsing fund year after year to backfill the budget to prevent layoffs. So unfunded mandates, we've already talked about it. The financial literacy unfunded mandate will cost us about $110,000 in a new hire. The indoor air quality management oversight, or testing rather, will be a $25,000 one-time expense. The HVAC indoor air quality mandate for a management system is about a $500,000 mandate, but I do need to be clear that that's part of our capital ask. That's not part of our operating budget ask. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have to add a bilingual tutor to John Patterson to meet that mandate, and that's about $50,000 annually. So the total of all those costs is about $685,000, but $500,000 of that would be in our capital as it relates to the HVAC controls. Here's all of the breakdown of some of the expenditures relative to our contractual obligations. In other words, we have no control over this. A contract dictates what people are paid, and they have to be adhered to. They're bargained collectively. We bargained with our teachers last summer. We did have a town council representative on that committee, and the teachers will be getting a 4.3% increase this year. That's actually slightly below the state average, so it was a very fair bargaining event, but that does add up to a $1.1 million increase for that group. Our AFSCME group, which actually is overseen by the town, is currently under negotiation, so we don't know where that's going to land. We had to make an estimate of about a 4% raise, which puts that at about a $203,000 increase. Our NASA administrators or have contract in place, and they're getting a 1.73% increase next year, which is about $61,000. The nurses are currently undergoing contract negotiations, so we had to estimate that at 4%, which will be $33,000 increase. Our CNIA administrators are going to be under negotiation this year, and that's our non-instructional administrators. So we estimated about a 4% increase there with a $14,000 impact. Our ATs are overseen by the town or the town manager, so we're just estimating a 4% there. We don't know, but that's reasonable. $44,000 impact. Our paras and tutors are not under a contract, but we just align them with everybody else at 4%, $142,000. And all other non-bargaining, which is some central office folks that are in a union, is $358,000 for a total of $2,047,000 just in obligatory contractual and salary obligations. Here's our 9-year non-lapsing fund history, and that was an outgrowth of our meeting last time that folks wanted to see the full history of non-lapsing. And it was initiated in 2016-17, and that is something that was worked out between the board and the town at the time, where we're allowed to carry over up to 1% of our budget at the end of the year to a non-lapsing fund, and it's undesignated. You can use it for any purpose that you see fit. I think it was envisioned to be used for emergencies or envisioned to be used for big capital items. But I don't believe it has. It's been more used as an offset to operating costs. So you can see that in 2016-17, $1.2 million was deposited. Nothing was spent, so that was the first balance. 2017-18, it's notable that there was a my print's really small, 290 deposit. And that was a year that there was only a 0.29% budget increase. So there was quite a bit of expenditures that year, $1.2 million in expenditures. So that kind of drained it down to about $700,000. 2018-19, there was a deposit of 728 and nothing was spent. That left us with $1 million at that time. And then you'll see, this is kind of where I entered the picture. In 2019-20 was a COVID year. And because our expenses were down substantially and we were getting grant money, we did have revenues to add to non-lapsing of over $1 million. Similarly, in 2021, we did have, and again, some COVID monies, not as many. We were more in operation that year without the shutdown. We had hybrid for a few months and then we were fully operational most of that year. So we had about $700,000 to add to non-lapsing. And that put us at about a $3 million mark. And then as you can see, the last several years, we have not put any money in non-lapsing, but we've drawn down. In 2021-22, the board received a 0% budget increase, so they had to dip into non-lapsing about a little under $500,000. And then this year, or last year rather, we dipped into it by about $80,000. One thing that is a phenomenon specific to last year is that we started a budget freeze in January to preserve as much of the non-lapsing money as we could. Additionally, that was a year in which our open choice reimbursements came back higher than anticipated. So that money was also helped us not use as much of the non-lapsing monies. As I mentioned earlier, next year I've planned for that money and it's already in the budget as an offset, so that those revenues will not be available to us. So we anticipate this year spending or utilizing $1 million of the non-lapsing money, which will leave us with $1.5 million for next year. And then taking into account the MOU that we hope will go through, there'll be $400,000 deposited next year, which will give us $1.9 million in non-lapsing fund resources, which we've already factored into this budget. So just a brief description of the board, the non-lapsing board CIP MOU that we're working on, and then it'll be an item for the board to take up in a later agenda item tonight. The town appropriates $125,000 annually into our board CIP fund. The current board CIP ordinance requires that all revenues generated from the board for tuition are deposited into the board CIP. And it currently has a cap of 1.2 million. And the board CIP forecast for this year is about $1.6 million. So therefore, we'll exceed the cap by about $400,000. Excess revenues would be at risk of forfeiture without this MOU and would go back to the town. So our proposed MOU will address this. And like I said, when we get to that agenda item, I'll have Lou explain that in significant detail. So a summary of our budget drivers. So currently, the big drivers are special ed. Those costs are going up by $1.4 million, which created a budget increase of 1.72% overall. Salary increases are $2.047,000 or 2.89% of the total budget increase. Health insurance and benefits are $1.7 million or 2% of this increase. And all other expenditures, which includes utilities, repairs, curriculum supplies, and more, is about $1 million or 1.29%. So the superintendent's board request to the board is for a $6.5 million increase or a 7.99% increase. These totals, by the way, already reflect the non-lapsing fund utilization and all the grant monies as well. Here's some of the variable budget resources, just to illuminate the impact of the non-lapsing money. Last year, we anticipated, or this year rather, that we'd use 1.7 million in non-lapsing resources to offset our budget this year of 82 million, and that was 2.1% of the total budget. This year, because of the budget freeze and trying to preserve the resources, people may wonder, well, what are you not doing by doing a budget freeze and trying to preserve as much of the non-lapsing money as possible? A lot of the maintenance items don't get done. Any type of, obviously, emergency repairs get done, but not run-of-the-mill things that you can put off. So you do have to sacrifice, but you have to make a conscious decision about how much. So we've adjusted our reliance on the non-lapsing fund this year, and that's going to go down to 1.2% of our total budget, actually 1.27. Next year, with our current projections of using $1.9 million of non-lapsing resources, with a total budget of $88,767,000, that will be 2.2% of our budget. So relying on the non-lapsing, it gives our budget increase kind of a false, it's a little bit lower than it really needs to be because we're trying to offset it with non-lapsing resources. This is just a general summary of how we're using our grants. Again, as we go through the budget books over the coming nights, you'll see very specifically, but our current grant utilization allows us to cover 17 or 16.9 teaching positions. 1 administrator is grant funded. 30 of our paras are grant funded. That Effective School Solutions program that we use is almost all grant funded. The Chief of Strategy, Innovation, and Culture for Equity is grant funded. And the total positions district-wide are 48.9 or 2.4 million utilization of grant resources for positions. Here's a summary of our overall FTEs. There are 5 non-bargaining administrators at central office. That will not change next year. NASA is our administrative group. That will also remain at 25 people. The NTA will go down from 399.5 staff to 395.5, or a reduction of 4. And just so if folks were wondering, well, what's the percentage? 92.5% of our staff are teaching positions, 7.5% are administrative positions, and next year it'll be 92.4% are teaching staff, 7.6%. And there are no new administrative positions, but that decimal point goes up a little bit because we're reducing 4 teaching positions. Here's our budget, just reconciliation adjustment process. Last year, our budget was $82,199,380, which was a 4.5% increase. The initial budget that came in from all of our staff was $92,689,255, or a 12.76% increase. Over the last several weeks, we've been diligently reducing that through looking at offsets, simply removing things from the budget. We cut 3.9 million from the budget, which leaves us with 88,767,110, which is a 7.99% increase. So my request from the superintendent's office is a 7.99% increase. There is still the potential for the board to reduce the budget further. A lot of it is time sensitive, but we're always looking at if anyone were to resign or any type of realized savings we can get from our budget freeze could reduce our reliance further on the non-lapsing fund, which would free up more money for next year. But right now, we anticipate the balance of our non-lapsing fund, or 1.9 million, will be expended next year. We also, so attrition possibilities are kind of similar to what I mentioned on the first bullet. The last bullet is health insurance adjustments. Typically, we're currently at a 10% projection of health insurance increases for next year. That's set by the carrier of record. We don't determine that. We're told what to put into the budget. Right now, we were told to increase it by 10%. There is a chance that'll come down. We just, right now, that's still pending probably until April. So this is just a summary of the last several years of budgets. You can see 2021, our budget was 76,768,000. 22-23, it was 78,660,000. This year's budget is 82,199,000, and then this year I'm requesting 88,767,000 for a total of a 7.99% increase, or a $6.5 million increase.
Ms. Weaver? Just on the assumptions of including, that does not or does include the ECS max or min assumption, like the 1.4 or 1.9.
It includes relative to ECFs because that money goes to the town.
Right.
What's factored into this number is that the town would take over paying for magnet school tuition, which we currently estimate to be $566,000. If that has to come back into the board's budget, that would add another percentage, Lou, or a 0.5%?
A little more than half.
Yep. Thank you.
Can this slide be shown to reflect the increase every year? When I look at it in the future, I'd like to see that, looks like it's 2% from 21 to 22. Looks like it's a little more like 3%. That would give me a better idea.
I can show you that on the next slide.
Okay.
So looking at our historical averages, this gives you our budget history since 2017. And each year we're hovering, it's been a variety of different levels. So the average is 2.29% over the past 8 years, or 7 years rather. So that's our average. With so you can kind of look through that. The lowest increase was 21-22 at 0, and the highest increase would have been last year at 4.5. And as the board starts their deliberations next week, we want to kind of put out there what could happen with any further cuts. As stated previously, we are using all of the non-lapsing money, so that's $1.9 million as an offset. So if there were further cuts, that could lead to essential service reductions, higher class sizes, which actually will happen a little bit for the 2 positions that we are reducing. Student mental health concerns, because some of the positions that I'd like to leave in would support that. Special education is heavily regulated, and if we reduce those services, more likely than not, parents would take legal action, which is very specific to Connecticut because of our structure about special ed. This would have an impact on our opportunity gap work, because typically our more marginalized students are more deeply impacted by budget cuts. And it's a very difficult environment already for teachers right now. If more support services are reduced, it just will affect the school climate and culture and morale. And, you can offset some of your increases by charging parents more Chromebook insurance money, or pay for play, or building usage fees, but ultimately those all still affect the taxpayers. Often we get asked, well, how do we compare to our DIRG? And right now I did a poll of all my colleagues in DIRG D. Not everyone got back to me. You can see the districts that did get back to me. The districts on this slide have not yet gotten back to me. But when you look at the average of our DIRG, the average increase is 6.27%. So some may say, oh, why are we so much higher, or 1.5% higher than average? And that I would argue there are 2 reasons for that. One is that we are relying on the non-lapsing funds. So year after year, we've had to do that. Therefore, our budget asked this year is higher because of that. And we also have open choice revenues that we're trying to factor into this number effectively. And that can sometimes affect our number when our numbers ebb and flow with open choice. But I think the big reason for our slightly higher than average ask than our DIRG has been our reliance on the non-lapsing fund. In other words, the districts on this chart have averaged higher increases over the years than us, which has led to this kind of a catch-up year right now. And of course, the loss of ESSER dollars. So we knew that would be an impact, and that is exactly what has happened. So
Weaver has another question.
I was just going to say, if you have some of it, because I remember we do this kind of every year of looking at as the other districts come in. But I think what they actually got last year and the year before I don't know how much we have going back about the other districts in our DIR, but I know it was much higher than ours every year.
I can
And
create that
just kind
chart.
of seeing, not saying, oh, we're just measuring to everybody else here, but I thought it was particularly in the year we got a 0, it was drastically different. And so
There's
this-
been several years
we
where
kind
we've
of
been,
anticipated this coming. I mean, this is what happens when you kick cans, right? Like
Yes.
it's literally happened. So just having that numbers to be able to compare, I think would be beneficial.
I will have that by Monday.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Gail, if you want to just,
I thought I saw one district that had -8%.
No, I'm sorry. That's approximately 8%. My apologies. That approximate does look like a negative. No, you can't have a negative, well, yeah, you can't have a negative 8% because of the minimum budget requirement, but thanks for clarifying that. I knew someone was going to say that. So anyway, our next steps are I take this show on the road and I promote the budget to all of our faculty members, because many of them do reside in Newington. I go to our PTO meetings so parents understand what's behind the budget. We have workshops coming up next week and the week after to really dive into the books. And then the board has to approve this budget, a budget by February 24th. And then Chair Parati and I will present to the town council on March 26th. And that at that time, it's the board's approved budget. My budget gets transmitted to the board and then they have at it. So I'll turn it back over to the chairman
Right.
for questions.
Mr. Halloran.
We have a few. First one being, can we turn the camera back on for the public? Because I know it's off.
Oh,
Can Deb do
That's only in the room.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, as long as they can see us, I'm good. Second question is, you said the 504 has no funding from the state or federal. What's the cost to the town for 504?
boy, I'd have to do a little homework on that
Okay.
because it varies. Some kids are just getting classroom modifications, but other kids are getting services, busing, sometimes para support. So I'll have to try to get an estimate on that.
Okay. My next question with the ESSER funding lapsing. For the elementary schools, how many security officers would there be if we did not fund them through ESSER funding? Would there be 0 at the
Yes.
elementary school?
Each
Okay.
school has just one.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
So there would be no
There'd be
security
0.
officers without that funding.
There was 0 before COVID. Yep.
Okay. And just my last question, with the high school adding AP pre-calculus, just as a little bit of my own understanding, what is involved with AP pre-calculus versus various pre-calculus? You have algebra, geometry, calculus. What's the difference between AP calculus, pre-calculus, and pre-calculus?
May I kick that question over to Ms. Freeman?
The primary difference is that AP pre-calculus prepares kids to take the AP exam in pre-calculus, thus offering them an opportunity to earn college credit, going to Dr. Brumman's presentation on college credits.
That's what I assumed. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Oh, I thought you were asking like, what do they learn in AP class? I mean, I was not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No, I'm good.
Yes, I took trig in high school, but I didn't take that.
Are there, Mr. Sharma?
Just a quick question on, can you just talk about the expansion of pre-K and how much revenue are we getting in, or we expect to get more?
Absolutely. We are currently only offering 2 full-day pre-Ks, one at Green, one at Chafee. And part of that was due to the renovation at Reynolds where we had to move pre-K around. Next year, we anticipate our revenues in pre-K tuition will increase from 150,000, Lou, to what? 300. So we anticipate a doubling of the revenue, and we will show that in the budget deep dive, but it's a $300,000 offset. So in other words, we're expanding pre-K without adding any teachers.
Are there any other questions? And we'll get into
details of all our programs in the next week, but just high level. Ms. Weaver?
I know we're foregoing one of the school psychologists. Where was that? What you said we're splitting one through the middle school? Do we have, we still have, we don't have one at each one, or
We have one
One
per school right now.
now? Okay.
The proposal from the special ed department was to add a district-wide psychologist because year after year, we do tend to need additional staff to do assessments
Yep.
and other types of chores or tasks. So we tried an experiment this year of having the E-Green psychologist spend time at the high school, and it's working. So we feel we can rectify that. It's not ideal, but it at least solves our problem without adding additional staff.
And then maybe just trying to look past this budget and on. I think that program is great to be able to have basically like a healthcare center in our schools. Wondering, is there ability to expand it to middle and elementary after a certain kind of time period? Is it just for high schools?
No, actually, it's a
Okay.
pre-K to 12 opportunity. So
Perfect.
each school will advertise it with my, help, put on the website, and any school can access that service. All we have to provide is a place for the clinician to sit with the child.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll go Ms. Yap and then Mr. Newton.
Hi, I have a question, Dr. Brumman, in regards to the speech pathologist. How can you find out like the ratios? And obviously, you were going to add the speech that you were considering, adding a speech pathologist. Is that because the current amount of speech pathologists we have are like? I know my son takes speech, and I know there's like a heavy like workload. Is there any way that we could consider like adding some of those positions back and maybe working it out that way? Because I know when my son was taking speech, it was like really hard for him because the speech pathologists were so overwhelmed, especially with the effects of the pandemic and children with those delays.
Yes, the board certainly would always have the ability to take some of the positions that we've reduced and put them back in. What I will do, though, for next week for our first night of deliberations is to have an overview of current speech pathology caseloads and how those measure up to the standard. Every organization has a caseload standard. So I will make sure we have that available Monday night.
Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead.
I have a question on the homeless students. How many do we have and how do they break down? Elementary, middle school, high school?
That I will get to you
Okay.
on Monday night. It's a good question.
Ms. Weaver.
This will probably be just follow up for future, but one of the things we've talked about, and it's not really for this year, probably next year, but just like in terms of facilities. And obviously we're just seeing those costs, so that cost breakdown. I guess it's more of an ask maybe for the town too. If we could just kind of get like comparison of where those were and maybe potential as we look to the next budget of like where we could see crossover with the town. If that makes sense, like some of our maintenance stuff, some of our projects.
Like a
those
shared
types of-
service
Yeah.
question? Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Obviously, I know probably hard to like whip that up in 2 weeks, but just kind of looking down the road where there are maybe inefficiencies that we could garner for the next one. Thanks.
Thanks. Are there any other questions for tonight? Mr. Plord, I'll allow it.
Speak up to the microphone.
Yeah, just come up to the mic.
I just had a quick question out of curiosity. It wasn't mentioned in the presentation, but I'm just curious how funding and resources for health and for nursing services have changed post-pandemic now. I imagine much of the funding and increase in resources during the pandemic came from federal dollars or from grant dollars for PPE and things like that. But out of the native town budget, how have those resources changed? How are those changes reflected in this budget versus last year's, et cetera?
Steve, would you have that answer? I mean, we've kind of maintained our current level of nursing staffing. We have a float nurse.
Right, our staffing will remain the same as it has. We still have the same health needs that we've had throughout. In regards to the PPE and some of the other material resources that we received during the pandemic, we've just exhausted supply on that and/or are finishing up supply on that, but do not see a need to, repurchase a lot of that. It's just the standard materials that we would have pre-pandemic that we continue, and that's what is shown in this budget.
Thank you.
Ms. Wheeler.
Sorry, I'm just loaded with so many ideas now. So excited. And one, just want to, while we're here, just please note for my gratitude for all of the staff that the amount of time and effort this takes to put these together. Not only just like the manpower to physically put them together, but just the mental strain that does. So just wanted to thank everyone for being involved in that. I'm wondering, just to give you more work, is there a way we could do sort of like a cost breakdown for the special ed services and compare it to potentially if we were able to offer it in our schools versus having to outsource? So just kind of, if it was in Newington, this is how much it would cost, but due to the contractual services that have doubled or tripled depending on the type of service, this is how much it is. Maybe to get, just a real life example to see that drastic large number.
Increase.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing, and we'll break it down. When we looked at our analysis of special ed costs, we're actually down 10 outplacements over the past 5 years, but because we have offered more in-district programs. However, the cost for those kids who are still outplaced has gone up astronomically. So that's, luckily it would be worse if we didn't have in-district programs, but it has, the cost average over the past several years is substantial. But I'll see if we can do a little bit more breakdown relative to how this is factoring per child, and then the quandary or dilemma of the excess cost.
Right.
We just got an announcement from the state that it's underfunded for this year because they used the outplaced rates from the pandemic where kids were not outplaced as much because everyone was pretty much home. So that error has now led to an underfunding of the excess cost pot of money at the state. And we're hoping the legislators can fix that in the next few months. But that's kind of an example of the volatility of resources for special ed.
Is that because it was a biannual budget? It was presented so long ago?
No, it is a biennial budget. You're correct about that, but it really was a mathematical error by the state when they projected what the total cost for special ed students would be, they based it on data from the pandemic when fewer kids were outplaced. That's why we had those years where we had money that we could put back in the non-lapsing fund, because there's just lower costs because of the pandemic. For some reason, they used that tally to develop their budget, but they should have used more current data because kids are now going back to pre-pandemic levels of outplacements.
And just to clarify too, when you say like the legislators working on that, they're not going to come to a decision necessarily in time for us to budget. So we have to budget without that knowledge.
That is our conundrum. The excess cost debate won't be resolved by then. The ECS money will probably not know where that's going to land. We won't know whether there will be a reduction in magnet school tuition. So all of those variables are still going to be probably not known by the time the board has to vote on their budget.
Ms. Beatrice.
I have a question about class size. You talked about backfilling positions through attrition. I'm wondering two things. Number one, are there specific state mandates about class sizes? You cannot exceed a certain number of students within a certain classroom per grade level. And second, or are we cutting it really close by not having additional staff? How close are we to whatever ceiling that would need to be?
That's a great question. There are no state mandates on class size. We do, generally speaking, try to keep the primary age at 20 or less and the upper elementary and middle school in the low 20s. but there is no class size limit. I don't know if, Steve, there's anything you would add to that?
No, I mean, we consider the space and, fire hazards, things like that, so the space is conducive to the learning, but there is no cap like Dr. Brummett is sharing, and in district, we also don't have one. So there's not one statewide or in district.
We're not anticipating a huge jump where we would need to maybe increase another staff member or break up, into another third grade classroom or something like that.
Correct.
Sean?
Just to follow up to Ms. Weaver's question about, or I'm sorry, Ms. Beatrice's question about class size. How do we compare to our DERG in terms of teacher to student ratio?
We're very comparable to our DERG. We're probably right in the average range.
One quick question. Could you do maybe a slide that, just so folks know in town, how much do we save on like bus transportation because we have our own buses? We do not like use DATCO. In plain numbers, like how much are we saving like compared to other districts?
Sure.
So folks know like how much, yeah,
Yep, that's a great question. When we look, we historically looked at that and there's quite a savings involved, but I'll get a current figure for you, for the board. What was that?
We do get an extended life out of ours too. I think we cycle our buses 7 years worth of product.
We do. We go longer than what a vendor would.
Okay. Oh, Gail, you had a question? Yes.
Might have been actually what you were referring to, but you mentioned
Please
that-
turn the mic on. Thank you.
This might have been something that Ms. Weaver was referring to, but I know I actually do work with the Intensive Education Academy in West Hartford. And I know that I see figures about towns are very good at reimbursing us for our capacity. But you mentioned that the state, we were expected to get full reimbursement, but we're only getting 75%. Is that because of the problem that you were discussing with Ms. Weaver, or is there?
That has been exacerbated by the problem, but historically, the excess cost grant, districts are supposed to get reimbursed for any child that costs more than 4.5 times your average per pupil cost. So for Newington, if a student costs more than about $80,000, Lou, what's the threshold? $80,000-ish?
It's a little higher than that. It's closer to 88,000.
88. So if a student costs $88,000 or more to educate, most of the time they're outplaced, not always, the state's supposed to reimburse us for anything that goes above that. So in the case of this example, if it's our $88,000 threshold and they're 100,000, we should get 12,000 back. However, the state doesn't fully fund this, so we typically get maybe 70%, 72. So it's just been an initiative or a promise from the state that has not been kept. So we still are on the hook for these expenditures. But we still, for kids who go to IEA, for your example, we still have to pay IEA their full tuition that they charge. And actually, they're not as expensive as many. But what we get back gets variable depending on the funding that the state, it's a complex thing to understand, but the bottom line is the money we should be getting back, we're only getting a portion of it.
And are the superintendents doing any kind, I would imagine, like cooperative intensive lobbying? with
We
the state
are.
Legislators.
There'll be a legislative breakfast coming up in a week and a half that will be lobbying. We met with our lobbyist yesterday, who's at the state frequently to do that. We have a CAPS agenda that talks about where this should be, and I sent an emergency email today to Representative Turco, Farrar, and Senator Lesser to make sure they're fully aware of what the impact of the ECS money and the excess cost problem will mean to Newington. So I'm hoping they'll advocate on our behalf along with the lobbyists and others. And I'll probably testify at the state, as my colleagues will as well, to impress upon the legislators how this is going to be, in addition to the funding cliff because of ESSER dollars, now we've got these issues. So it's like a double whammy that will have an impact on everyone. And Newington, tonight we've talked about our impact.
And then just one, thought or question. You indicated that we actually have, you know, a student or two being transferred from Danbury and New London. I would imagine the same is occurring in some of our other, adjoining towns. Is there a way to share the bus services or the transportation services among towns so that?
Yes,
Okay,
we do, for homeless individuals, wherever the child is, the child was originally with us. Now, for circumstances beyond their control, they're in Danbury. The Danbury school system has to pay half the busing costs. And we also Dean in our transportation office, whenever we have to use an outsourced bus, we'll work with vendors and say, hey, is any other district going to IEA? Hey, we'll share a bus with West Hartford. So we do that whenever we can, to mitigate costs. But you can imagine, a round trip bus, even with someone paying half, is like, the annual cost for the examples that I've mentioned tonight is about $60,000, between $60,000 and $80,000. So even half of that is a lot of money. So it's a huge obligation that towns have. It's a well-intentioned law, but it does create a huge financial burden for towns.
And these couldn't be individual driven. It has to be in a van or a bus or?
They have to be certainly a school approved, a service that's approved for transporting children. And that's typically, they have a higher level of insurance and liability and training. So sometimes we can ask the parents if they want to drive, and then we just give them the average mileage rate. That happens rarely, but it does happen. But overall, those are the kinds of expenditures that really create these huge budget drivers in special ed and homeless.
Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And I would just add, you know, talking to other folks in other districts, you know, Councilor Bloomfield was saying it's just eating away. And one of my colleagues in Stamford said that they bus to Westchester and to, and to New York, just given the proximity of things. So, I mean, every town's dealing with this, every city's dealing with this, so we're not alone in that. But I think that drastic increase of our special ed students by that in just the last 2 years, it's like a convergence, I feel like, of
it is a perfect storm,
Yes.
unfortunately, of ESSER dollars going away and costs continuing to skyrocket. That's an unfortunate reality for this budget.
And I just wanted to add too, in terms of federal dollars we get for special ed, it is nothing.
That's another promise not kept, though I talk to Miguel Cardona about that all the time. Yeah, the federal government pays less than 10%. Is that correct, Lou? Is it about 10% or less?
Oh, less for that.
Less. And initially they were going to pay all of it. So that also is something that inevitably has become an impact to local.
Go ahead.
Dr. Roman, could you give me an example of, you said circumstances, a circumstance that a child with special needs is in Danbury now, and why they're in Danbury, number one, and then why they have to come here and they can't be serviced by the Danbury school system, which is pretty rich.
So in the case, that particular case was a homeless example, and the homeless law provides that if a child becomes homeless, the district still has to offer that parent the ability to stay in their home district. So a parent could choose, for example, to enroll in Danbury, but they don't have to. And they're homeless from the time that homeless incident happens until they find permanent housing. So we've got families in our district that have been homeless for 5 years. The other example for special ed would be the New London scenario, and that is students moved to our district from New London and were attending a school in that area that was a special ed school. And now we're trying to find them something closer to us. But in the meantime, they're still entitled to an education. So there's a lot. The laws are heavily weighted, and it's probably appropriate, toward making sure kids' educations are not disrupted. But that does not come cheaply.
Go right ahead. Okay. Well, and like I said, we'll get into the the weeds of everything, starting on Monday next week. So we can move on to our budget book overview. And our town counselors that are here and the ones that couldn't make it will receive the same book too. So can
Yes, those,
benefit from that as well.
if they
how
were
to
here,
read
they'll
it.
get it. Yep.
Please.
Good evening. My name is Karen Sear. I'm the Assistant Business Manager for the district. I work alongside Mr. Giacomowitz in the business office, and I'm here to provide you a overview of your budget books in front of you. So you'll see if you open your budget book, there is a letter from Dr. Brummett with an overview of the highlights of her presentation tonight, showing the areas where the increases are. Also included in that budget book is the agendas for the upcoming budget work sessions, which will begin on Monday, February 12th. We have also provided you sheets for the entitlement and other grants, the descriptions of how the grant works for the district, and the backup for the grant allocations. We've showed you where those grants are going to be offset and which programs, including the estimated dollars and the position that those grants will offset. The district uses an account code, a string of account codes. It's a 4-digit program code, including a 3-digit object code and a 2-digit location code. We have provided you the backup for what those codes mean. So a 2-digit location code is for each of the schools in the district. So you'll see a page there called location codes, and they will show you the different codes that are used in the budget books. We have also provided you the object code descriptions, which is the 3-digit code. You'll see there, and it gives a breakdown of everything, all the expenditures that are coded to those objects. Look through that. So you get back to, now you're going to get to those tabs, those colorful tabs, which we will start to go through Monday evening. And they show you, those are by program. And that behind those tabs, you will see a left-hand budget page, which shows you the highlights of the program, as well as a description, the various goals, and also includes any program improvements or program needs for the district. But that we will go through Monday evening. That's it.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any questions on how to read the budget book? You have a few days before Monday to get through it. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Not so much a question, but a comment. Thank you for putting this all together. It's going to take me a while to get through it. Thank you for ruining my sleep tonight. I'm a little upset by the amount of trees that had to die for this, but I appreciate the effort. It's thorough.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you, Karen. All right, our next agenda item is discussion and possible action on the MOU that that was mentioned earlier regarding the open choice reimbursement.
Thank you. And I just want to again start off by thanking the town manager, the mayor, the town finance director, who were involved in discussions about this. Some that I participated in and some that Lou had to handle when I was unavailable. So I'm going to ask Lou to provide the overview, and I'll post this on the screen in a moment, to how this was all cultivated into an MOU request. Go ahead, Mr. Giacomowitz.
Thank you, Dr. Brummett. The progression of open choice over the last 10 years has been significant as far as the special education costs that are incurred and the reimbursements that come back to the Board of Education. From humble beginnings where just a couple $100,000 was put out on our behalf or by us on behalf of all the open choice kids 10 years ago, is now up to about $1,300,000 for the year. The complementary piece of this is the town ordinance that says where the money has to go once you get it. So it's on a compulsory basis directed into the board CIP account, which the mechanics of are fine. There's no issue with any of, how that part works. It's just, we have now gotten into a position where the resources coming in overflow the capacity of the account. There is a hard cap written into the ordinance that says, the limit of funds that can be held in the board CIP account is $1.2 million. Okay. And what we're looking at for this year, if you can refer to the chart on the front of the memo, you can see the progression in that. This year, we're looking at a total revenue base coming into the Board of Ed CIP account of about $1.6 million. And of that, our last forecast for the open choice component of that will be $1,291,587. So you can clearly see we're going to be well over the cap just from that one relationship that's built in. The other dollars include the $125,000 mandatory appropriation by the town. There will be our building use fees that are charged to the various groups that rent, which would be the theater groups, the dance recital companies, various organizations that want to have a culture event that need a pretty big space. All of these are, we don't have a perfect schedule, but we have definitely a number of repeat customers who come back year after year to take advantage of the facilities we have to offer. And then you have the tuition receipts. And we do have tuition receipts beyond open choice. Occasionally there are families that will have moved out of town prior to the end of the school year, and they'd want to keep their students in Newington just for continuity purposes for the remainder of the year. And they'll go on a paid basis based on the length of time that they're going to be here. So and there's also interest earnings that are attributable to the account based on how much money is actually there that is partitioned to the Board of Ed for the money that's there. So how do we go about trying to work around the cap? What has happened is, and one of the very easy and clear examples with the open choice program is their students who are Harvard students have IEPs that request that they have a one-on-one para with them. Okay. Especially the last 2 or 3 years, our ability to even staff our own para positions has been severely challenged. Most, if not all, of these students that are in our district through open choice, their para comes to us by way of CREC. And we basically contract with CREC as contract services to acquire that staff member for us. Those individual positions are $60,000 plus that we now have to outlay on behalf of that. So that's somewhere around $700,000 of total expenses that we expend in advance and on behalf of the open choice program. So we need to have an appropriation that's adequate enough to carry those expenditures for the year. Those dollars will be reimbursed to us through the payment at the end of the year. So we will get back that $700,000. However, it goes to the board CIP account. It doesn't get to offset the expenses that we're incurring. So we have the need for an appropriation in the operating budget, which we will spend the $700,000. And when the full reimbursement comes back, that goes to the board CIP account. So that is okay if you can carry the appropriation. We're now getting to the point where the cap then puts us in a position of forfeiture of anything over $1.2 million for the year. So we're seeing that, we could be in a spot where there's $400,000 at risk. And that's not something that we easily can work around because the money shows up sometime in June as one check, but maybe it'll show up in July as one check. So you have a lot of uncertainty surrounding the day it shows up. And then typically as we get to the end of the school year, you'd have no opportunity to plan for things going through the board CIP accounts. Operating budget expenditures are geared as a something that is being done this year for this year. The board CIP account, when they established the $1.2 million cap, we had about $300,000 a year of regular revenues going through there. So that would provide a 3, maybe even a longer horizon of being able to organize what you wanted to do out of the board CIP account. Plan for, if you need architects and bidding situations to be involved, you have adequate time for that, especially if you're trying to do something that happens over the summer. Just imagine the difficulty if $1 million check shows up June 10th, school closes June 15th, and the ability to get a project started within a week is just not possible. So these are the logistical hurdles that, we face as part of that. So in constructing a request that we presented to the town as far as saying, we would like to have the ability to have money moved out of the board CIP account because it'll be just lost to the cap if we just leave it there, and put it to use to help pay these bills. I know a number of the other school districts have the entire open choice receipts credited back to the operating budget. That's a fine solution as well. It just creates one different problem for our CIP account because it's been designed over the last 3 years to carry our entire technology purchase. And we're somewhere in the $750,000 a year range of needing to provide resources into the board CIP account just to carry the technology costs for all the Chromebooks and related items. So if 100% of our open choice dollars got redirected back to the operating budget, would fix that problem completely on the operating budget. We now are significantly short in the board CIP account for being able to fund our technology requests. So we're trying to develop an approach that has some balance and some flexibility to it that would be acceptable to the town, as well as address these critical needs, because these reimbursements from open choice only look to be getting bigger as the years go by. It's not something that's just a one-time blip and it's going to go back to the way it was. It's going to be this way for foreseeable future. So in trying to address both the short-term and the long-term needs of the school district and the town, presented this document to Mrs. Trevathan and sorry, Janet Murphy downstairs as the finance director, as far as floating the ideas, seeing what things were okay or they would take under consideration. And then we had a meeting yesterday with them, and the highlighted items in yellow that are on the copy you got today were the byproduct of discussions yesterday as far as what modifications that were put into the document. This primarily was just, we were writing in that if this transfer would not be subject to the 1% cap. That's the town regulation for the Board of Ed, that only 1% of the board operating budget can go into the non-lapsing fund. The 2% at the state level transcends everything. So that really kind of becomes the ceiling of activity that can happen across whatever activity is going on. So that was really the one major change. There are several other requests that members of town administration brought forward yesterday, and those are with Dr. Brumman and will have to be discussed further before seeing which direction those go in. But nothing among them really was a deal breaker at any level. So with that, I'd like to just stop for a minute right here and ask, now everybody understands this 100%, right? Show of hands. I probably won't get anybody to raise their hands. So, in trying to, describe this as, it's really a seesaw that you have, that if money goes in one place, it comes away from the other. How do you find the right balancing point? And we are balancing 3 unique aspects of the operation. You have the money that's in non-lapsing, which has its own set of rules. The money for the board CIP account that has all its own set of rules, and just the necessity of what you need to have in the board operating budget. So it's just trying to find a decent balance between those 3, competing situations and different concerns that are in place today because of how things have changed over the last 10 years or so. So with that, I'll stop and take some questions if there are anybody.
Yeah, and I'll just One second, Sean, I'll get to you. I think so the intention of our discussion tonight is to have the board agree to moving this forward. And then the town council will get a presentation and explanations and questions presented at a future town council meeting, hopefully before the budget is all decided. So this conversation will be for the board to decide if that's something we want to do. Mr. Halloran.
Thank you, Lou. I usually don't ever have to ask you for more detail. I don't have to probe too much. But I will have to just ask for a couple points of clarification. On the sheet provided, it says $400,000 of the 2023 to 2023 revenues. Should that be 2023 to 2024 revenues?
Right, that 400,000 was part of the budget adoption process a year ago.
Okay.
Where resources that were available at that time were incorporated into how the 4.5% funding level for the operating budget was developed for this year.
Okay.
He actually pointed
it's-
out a typo. It's the 2023, 2024.
Just
school
want to
year.
be clear.
Yes, you are correct.
And with the CIP budget, essentially open choice blows out our cap. So that money, that 400,000 is money that's earmarked for education, but potentially goes back to the town and can be spent on anything.
Correct, goes back to the general fund.
So even if it's earmarked for education, it could potentially be spent for anything,
Not education.
non-education budget. And my second question or point of clarification is you said that our open choice students are coming through needing para help, and typically those paras are contracted through, correct?
They haven't, because we've had significant difficulty attracting and retaining our own.
And that was my question. Is that because we're having a difficult time or attracting
We're not
and retaining our own
competitive on
paras?
salaries and the
So we have
benefits.
to contract. Thank you.
Ms. Weaver?
I guess just a question actually regarding some of the highlighted language would be, so was some of, well, we haven't had any revenues going in, so where the non-lapsing fund is coming in, just want to clarify, we're not transferring in or out, like how, I guess my question is, when we're obviously transferring that money out of cap to avoid the cap, but where does non-lapsing come into play just on the statutory front? Just, would it go into non-lapsing is, I guess, my question.
It could, right?
Okay.
That was when we brought the idea forward a few months ago
Okay.
To the town finance director, and I'm just presenting which approach do you think would be potentially supportable? And she said, well, having the money come out of the Board of Ed CIP to the non-lapsing is probably a concept that the groups could get behind and develop a consensus on it.
Okay, so it's not like a requirement has to go there.
No.
And it's not a requirement, it doesn't have to go there. It's just an opportunity or possibility, and then that's subject to the state statute. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that highlighted language, if I'm reading correctly, so the town, according to our ordinances, the town allows us to put up to 1% of our Board of Ed budget into the non-lapsing fund. And this additional language says the state of Connecticut allows up to 2%, so this wouldn't count towards our 1% that the town allows us. So if for per chance we had a huge overage and we wanted to put, what, 880,000 into, we could do that plus the open choice.
Correct. Right. It's, if you just think very simplistically, the overall cap of what you can deposit in any one year is 2% of the operating budget. So this year we're $82 million budget. That's about $1,640,000 of a total cap, irrespective of what the sources are.
Mr. Page, if you would just come up to the mic.
I already may know the answer to this, but as I look at this cheat sheet, it looks like the total BOE CIP revenues in 2017-18 were 534,319. And then in 23-24 are 1.6 million. And then I look at the number of students, 91 in that same time frame, and then up to 117. Is that because of the fixed increase in labor costs? Because the ratio, we're at 3 times the dollar amount, but only about 27 to 30% increase in students.
The answer is no.
Okay.
Two different parts of it. The participation revenue for Newington, providing a home for any one magnet school kid has increased significantly over the last 10 years as well.
Okay.
So that part is part of the state grant. So that's not part of what this is. This is strictly dealing with the supplemental special education costs.
Okay.
So what we're aware of that's occurred is that as more kids are getting into the open choice pipeline from Hartford, we've been seeing a higher proportion of those students being students of need in the special ed area. And then whatever the IEP program that's been developed for that student will drive what our responses are going to be. You know, we're not accepting or declining them based on what that IEP is. We're taking them.
Right.
Right. And that will be really the cost follow the IEP in this case. There's really no other description that I can give you. And the sophistication, the intensity of the IEP is different for every student. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
and this is really the hold harmless element of the program for the benefit of the school district. So the incentives are to take all the kids, take as many as you want.
Okay.
And since we're now at the level of 3%, we do want to maintain that level because of the financial incentives for on the participation fee side that, you know, accrues to the benefit of the district. You know, when you saw earlier in the presentation, there was $928,000 as a grant offset.
Mhm.
That's the participation fee side of this
Okay.
that provides the incentive to, you know, let the program be vibrant and, you know, creating a very good environment in the school district for the kids.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Newton and then Ms. Weaver.
Yeah, I just want to be clear for the public out there that's listening. This is strictly money that comes in from the city of Hartford for our open choice students. And it's tuition reimbursement, basically.
Specifically for
And
special
anything that's over could end up in the town's budget versus education money. And in my opinion is I've always
Over the
been
cap, yes.
over the cap. And my thing is, I think that we need to keep education money with education.
Just a logistical question about the motion. I mean, 'cause it's like a support the concept of, is this, I guess my question is, do we need to have this formalized? Like or we just, like, just generally, we don't have to like make the motion. You could just do it, I guess. But my question would just be because it hasn't gone to Shipman and Goodwin yet. Would we vote on actual language, like an actual MOU then?
For purposes of tonight, the board would just be voting on the concept of that this MOU concept of allowing us to have this overage go into the non-lapsing. The language needs to be vetted by the town's attorney, our attorney,
Okay.
and then the town still has to approve it as well, so.
And then I was just curious about that last line about you're authorized to make any necessary transfer requests. I just didn't know if that was applicable to next year or this year, like, well, 'cause that's already in the budget.
Right,
Yeah.
the goal is this would get into play in time for this year.
Right.
So that because we
Okay.
anticipate this year will go over the cap as
That's
well.
just what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the sense of urgency,
Right.
which is why an ordinance change at this time wouldn't be timely.
Right.
And our hope, or at least what's written here, is that the intention is that eventually it will be an ordinance change, because there's a note that says it will remain in effect until the ordinance is changed. So it'll be applicable this year, next year, and future until potentially, if the town council is agreeable, the ordinance is changed to just make this a permanent situation.
Right, like the MOU is not, because I've talked a lot about some of the MOUs we've done in the past. This one is more just in lieu of having that ordinance changed for clarity's sake.
Yes,
It's not binding other than exploratory.
right, I mean, this is still going to have to go through a few more hoops. This is hoop number 1.
Would anyone be willing to read the recommended motion?
Move the Newington Board of Education support the concept of an MOU that allows for open choice special education tuition receipts to be transferred from the BOE CIP fund to the NLF, aka the non-lapsing fund. This concept will allow for the BOE at its discretion to make multiple transfer requests within a fiscal year as long as the total requests do not exceed total open choice special education tuition receipts during that year. The superintendent of schools is authorized to make all necessary transfer requests.
Second.
I think it was a tie. Is there any further discussion? No? Please call.
Mary Beecher,
Yes.
Yes.
Anthony Miller,
Yes.
Timothy Newton,
Yes.
Amy Spragg,
Yes.
Pam Sharma,
Yes.
Jessica Weaver,
Yes.
Anastasia Yap,
Yes.
motion passed unanimously.
All right, thank you. And again, there will be further discussions and hopefully the town council gets their opportunity soon to talk about it. Okay, our next agenda item is a fun one. The mayor actually had let us know of a neighbor town who is doing an essay contest for a kid board chair and kid mayor. So we thought it was a really cute idea and we wanted to bring it to the board to see what you think. So this is a flyer that's mocked up. It's not finalized or anything, but just the intention is that elementary students can write an essay for why they want to be a kid mayor or why they want to be a kid board of education chair. We would choose one per school for each position and allow them to come to a board of ed meeting or a town council meeting, read their essay, and just have a really fun, cute contest. So are there any, do you want to say anything?
It sounds like really fun. I'm big on promoting civic education. I think this is a really good way to bring it into schools and make it a fun thing and make it successful and just trying to make it fun. So,
Yeah.
Thanks for being amenable.
It's a good teaching, man.
And Suzie?
The motion just doesn't have for grade level, so I just wanted to, like, up to grade 4. I don't know what kid governor uses. I think
Yeah,
they
I
use-
think, well, I mean, we can choose, I guess, what we think. We were kind of seeing, well, elementary, do you have kindergarten? Like, are they too young? Do we do like second to fourth or third?
Ms. Kraus, would you like to, should we limit this to the upper elementary? We'll let you make a fun decision.
One thing that might help with that decision is that we do run a student council in the elementary schools, but we do not start it in kindergarten. So second grade is more likely, especially with the writing that would be involved, to understand. That's when the social studies curriculum really gets into what government is. Second graders come and see the town hall and start to understand what's happening. So that would probably be a good threshold.
Sounds good.
So grades
Second.
2 through 4. That's our upper elementary.
Kid governor's 5th grade.
Well, that doesn't apply to us. Yeah, we're starting them early. All right, is there any questions or someone want to read the motion? Go ahead.
I move the Newington Board of Education approve the Kid Board of Education Chair, Kid Mayor program for grade levels 2 through 4.
Second.
Hi, Ms. Weaver, seconds. Any discussion? Yes.
I just want to say that beyond this being fun, I think Mayor Trister brought up a good point about it being a really good opportunity to get kids involved in civic responsibility. I think there's a lot of mystery around it because it's been laxed for maybe a few generations, maybe a few decades. I don't want to say generations, but when you come into this room and you sit on this table, we're talking about budgets, we're talking about big concepts, and it takes a lot of time. So I think the earlier we can get kids into the system and understand that you can challenge the status quo, ask questions, and really try to do what's right for the general population is a wonderful thing. So I'm 100%, 110% behind it.
Thank you. Anything else? All right.
Mary Beecher,
I'm going to grandstand for 1 second. 100% yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Sam Sharma,
Yes.
Jessica Weaver,
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So, Mr. Mayor, we'll work together and come up with how to pick the winners, how to get this out there. We'll work with Dr. Bremen to get it distributed to our second through fourth graders. So I'm very excited about that. Okay. And we're back to public participation. So if anyone's online or in the room, feel free to come up or raise your hand. And any remarks by board members?
I was just going to say quickly announce our dates for the next budget sessions. If anyone is tuning in, it'll be February 12th, February 13th. We have a regular meeting the 21st, the 24th, and the 28th. Hopefully we're not there. Yeah.
Fourth, I think, is the
Yeah,
last.
yeah. So just want to announce that. And I also just saw that it is National Counseling Week, School Counseling Week. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of our school counselors. I know we do a special day for everybody, but nationally, just wanted to say thank you. We can't say thank you enough. So, and looking forward to a lovely budget. Happy budget season, everyone.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll just say thank you, especially to our guests who came again to listen to the presentation. We look forward to, if you want to show up to our next one on Monday, it'll be very in depth. But thank you for being here and for participating and just wanting to be a part of it. It's very promising to see you here. And thank you to the board for being here, and especially Dr. Brumma and your staff for putting together this lovely book. I'm very excited to get into it in depth on Monday. Yeah, and I'll just put another plug in for, this is an overview, but if the board can be in person as you're able, it's definitely a lot easier to go through and have, the presenters be here and just have it's just easier in person. So if you can make it, please try to do so. All right, so we did have to amend our agenda to have an executive session. So there will be no motions or activity after we come back into the regular meeting to adjourn. So we're going to go into executive session and then do our thing. Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of student confidential records.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Do we have enough of a forum for adjournment?
Brittany never showed.
That's it. Okay, so
For
she'll be
executive
good.
session,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yep, so we'll be good.
You don't need me, that's all right.
You're dismissed.
answer, so.
Okay, so now I gotta do this again, 479.
Please enter the conference number followed by the pound or hash key.
065.
What is your sense of? I don't think you left the other meeting today. You didn't leave the other meeting, you're still in the meeting. How long so you need to hang up?
But I'm not in that.
Helen Nelson was in the
Oh,
executive
so
session.
now I have to hang up.
I closed the executive session. It doesn't even exist anymore.
I'm gonna start paying people.
Please enter the conference number followed.
Yeah, I don't know what her, she was doing something. 0. Time to memorize it.
20 years ago, you were here.
I'm showing that Deb is in this meeting. Oh, you're trying to get Helen Nelson
Please
in.
hold while I try to connect you.
They're always heroes.
Okay. So, we're.
She is not.
This call is being recorded.
I did send her. Sorry, trying to do. All right, we're just trying to get Brittany back in so we can put closure on this.
So something didn't move to return to trial when she gets back on regular session.
We already did
We
that.
already made a motion, so.
We all left the executive session because we
So
did.
I'll just put 9:22 what it is.
Yeah, I actually noted the time.
You did note it?
I did, and I.
What a good secretary you
Mine
are.
was 9:19.
And do you not remember who made the motion?
I made the motion,
And-
and it was seconded by Sam.
Do we have Brittany's text?
She said,
And you have a possible motion for the expulsion rate? Somebody does?
We do have a motion, it just hasn't been proposed yet.
She hasn't yet.
she said nothing from, you sent her an email?
Theoretically, if Brittany doesn't join, can we have any member of the board join in regular session to get a quorum?
For expulsion? For the.
Well, yeah, for the.
Yeah, I mean, we could conceivably do the expulsion component without.
We can never adjourn.
I was just gonna say, at some point we need to adjourn.
Yeah, that happened to the town council the other night when they lost power for one meeting. I don't know if she's not getting.
Okay, she's got it, she's got it, she's
Oh, you
coming.
know why? Because she's not, she's doing it by telephone.
Yeah, she's coming. I was trying to find the link for her, but. Oh, there she is.
All right. we're
Hi.
in business.
Hi, thank you. Okay, so Sean, you can read the motion.
We're officially back in regular session, right?
Correct.
Okay, officially back in regular session. I move based upon the evidence in the record. The Board of Education finds the student in question engaged in conduct violating the board's policy number 5144 on student discipline, and that the student in question be expelled from school effective January 31, 2024, and continuing through the last day of the 2023-2024 school year with the tentative last day of June 13th, 2024.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? We'll go for roll call vote.
Brittany Carr,
Yes.
Sean Halloran,
Yes.
Anthony Neely,
Yes.
Amy Parati.
Yes.
Sam Sharma.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
You do it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you. Good night, guys.